After years of being the disappointment, I cut off my family. Now my addicted sister needs me, and my parents are demanding I come home. 3 years ago, at my sister's graduation party, I was left feeling utterly embarrassed by my own parents when they humiliated me in front of everyone. This event, surrounded by our close friends and family, was supposed to be only about my older sister, Amelia. She had just graduated from college and had secured an amazing job which she was very excited to start with. When my parents stood up to deliver a speech in her honor, I expected words that would celebrate her accomplishments only. After all, she had worked hard to reach this milestone, and she deserved every bit of recognition that night. In their speech, when they began to speak about my sister as one of the greatest blessings in their lives, I wasn't really all that surprised. By then, I was old enough to have accepted the fact that my parents loved Amelia more than me. She had always been the more accomplished daughter. The one my parents compared me to every day. But then, my parents began to joke in their speech about how they should have stopped getting pregnant after having Amelia because according to them, the second-borns are usually always useless anyways, and how with just Amelia in their life they could have spent more time and energy on her instead of wasting it on me. I was stunned to hear them say such hurtful things, openly and carelessly, while I was sitting right there. I looked around the room, hoping that maybe anyone would notice how upsetting their words were. But all I saw were the faces of my family, laughing along as if this cruel comparison was nothing more than harmless humor. Although my parents had always made me feel lesser and unworthy many times before, this was the first time they'd revealed it so publicly, leaving no room for me to hide from the fact that in their eyes, I was simply not good enough when compared to their precious daughter, Amelia. This wasn't some isolated incident or moment of bad judgment. It was a confirmation of what I'd felt all my life, that my older sister would always be the daughter they cherished, while I was seen as a distant afterthought, being the second born. Growing up, I became accustomed to the unspoken favoritism that ran through our household. It was constant, creeping in through their words, their actions, and their habits. For my birthdays, my parents would often forget to wish me, and on more than one occasion, they were conveniently on work trips when my birthday came around, so I would be pretty much left alone. But when it came to Amelia, they'd never miss her moment. Both my parents would be there, every year without fail, planning an elaborate party and ensuring she felt celebrated. Watching the way they showered her with affection on her special day, I learned early on to manage my expectations and accept that my birthday simply didn't hold the same importance to them. Since I was always an outgoing child, I was often told by my parents that I was troublesome or annoying for simply being who I was. I was scolded for things as small as being too talkative or expressing my interests openly, and labeled as difficult because I didn't fit the quiet, demure mold they seemed to prefer. In contrast, Amelia's reserved nature and introverted habits were praised endlessly. She was seen as well-behaved and mature in our family, the ideal daughter. As a result, over the years, she was the one they showcased and paraded around in front of everyone, while I was the one they often critiqued. I tried, for a time, to live up to the image my parents seemed to want. I put in the effort, hoping that if I acted differently, achieved more, or followed the path they'd laid out, they might eventually see me in a new light. But as I grew older, it became clear that I couldn't simply mold myself into a copy of Amelia. We were two different people, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't become her. Eventually, I just gave up and instead tried to grow accustomed to their constant admiration for her, the way they'd brag about her accomplishments to anyone who'd listen while ignoring everything that I have ever done. However, all those moments, cutting as they were, had at least been kept within the family. My parents had never humiliated me in front of others, so I was taken aback by how casually they seemed to embarrass me during their speech for Amelia's graduation. This was the first time they had let the entire extended family see just how little regard they had for me. What stung me even more was that not one single member in my entire family spoke up or told my parents how this was inappropriate. No one even so much as gave me a sympathetic look after my parents made those jokes at my expense. My parents continued to shower Amelia with praises, their voices filled with pride that I had never seen directed my way. Then, they proudly announced that they had bought her a graduation gift, a brand new car. Something she had always dreamt to have. The room erupted into applause, cheers, and laughter, with everyone's attention fixed on Amelia as she hugged my parents, brimming with joy and gratitude. The three of them looked so happy. At that moment, I felt like an outsider in my own family. The strange thing is, that I have never harbored any jealousy towards Amelia. We'd always gotten along well enough, and I truly believed that whatever good came her way, she deserved it. But that speech? That broke me. If you're wondering whether I confronted my parents after that humiliating speech, the answer is yes, I did. For years, I had quietly endured their favoritism, their disregard, and their hurtful remarks. I internalized all of it, convincing myself that maybe if I just kept quiet, if I just tried to be strong and not make a fuss, things might get better. But that night after the speech, after being made the butt of their joke in front of everyone, I finally reached a breaking point. I was tired of holding everything in, tired of pretending like their words didn't hurt me anymore. So, I decided I couldn't keep silent any longer. I gathered the courage to speak up, thinking maybe my parents would see how deeply their actions had affected me. I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to recognize the hurt they had caused over the years and acknowledge the embarrassment I felt at that moment, to at least show that they cared enough to listen to me. I thought that if I expressed my feelings, they might regret what they said, or at least feel remorse for making me feel so insignificant. But when I finally confronted them, I was met with a cold, dismissive response. They barely gave my words any thought. Instead of empathy or an apology, they told me I was overreacting, as if the years of being overlooked and belittled could be shrugged off so easily. They acted as though my feelings didn't matter, as though I had no right to be upset with them. My dad went so far as to tell me he had nothing to be proud of when it came to me, and that I shouldn't hold it against them if they felt disappointed by who I was. I remember the way he said it, so matter-of-factly, as though my life didn't matter to him. On the other hand, my mom pointed out that I was being too needy by getting upset over something so trivial like this and asked me to stop overreacting. It was like my parents were insinuating I hadn't even earned the basic respect of being their child because I hadn't accomplished enough, that I was somehow less deserving of their pride or love than Amelia simply because I wasn't her. The matter even got back to my sister, who sided with my parents, obviously, insisting that I was being too harsh on them. She told me that I should not be this upset about their graduation speech since it was just a harmless joke. She even said something that cut me to my core, something I will never forget. Amelia told me that if I had just studied and worked hard like she had, maybe I could make them proud too. Those words stung more than anything else. The implication that I hadn't tried hard enough to earn their respect was devastating. She made it sound so simple, as if all the years of effort I had put in were invisible to her, as if my struggles and my own attempts to find my place didn't count for anything. As my older sister, I had expected her to protect me in some way, but she didn't do that. Hearing that from her felt like betrayal. Looking back, that conversation changed everything. I realized after that I was done with my family, done trying to gain their approval, done explaining myself, and done waiting for love or validation that would never come. From that day forward, I directed all my energy into building something for myself. I poured myself into my studies, focusing on the things I could control, the things that could lead me to a better future. 2 years later, all of that work paid off when I got accepted into my dream college on a full scholarship, an accomplishment that was mine alone. It was an achievement that belonged entirely to me, a result of my hard work, my dedication, and my refusal to let my family's neglect define who I was. I had earned that success, and for the first time, it felt like I had done something that was truly mine. My parents were stunned when I gave them the news, almost as if they had never even expected me to go to college in the first place, let alone with a scholarship. My sister checked my acceptance letter twice, as if she couldn't quite believe I could actually achieve something on my own. Clearly all of them had underestimated me, and I felt a sliver of satisfaction watching their disbelief faces. However, my mom then turned my mood sour by mentioning how it was a good thing I had received a full scholarship, since they hadn't set aside any college fund for me anyway, so this solved all of their problems. I just shook my head at her comment. My parents had no problem covering my sister's education, yet didn't have the consideration to save anything for mine. When it was time for me to move out, I just packed up and left home to move into my college dorm. Since that day, I made a conscious decision to cut off all communication with my parents and my sister, Amelia. I didn't feel the need to explain my reasons to them. After all, they had shown time and again that my feelings, my perspective, and my worth didn't matter to them. Why should I exhaust myself trying to make them understand something they had proven incapable of even acknowledging? There was no apology that could erase the years of neglect and hurt they had inflicted on me, and since they hadn't even offered one, I knew trying to reason with them was futile. In the weeks and months that followed, my family reached out repeatedly, sending me emails and messages. At first, I was tempted to open them with the faint hope that maybe they had reflected on their actions and had reached out to make amends. But each message was just a bitter reminder of who they were. Instead of taking responsibility for the years of emotional pain they had caused, their emails were filled with attempts to gaslight me into believing I was the one being unreasonable. They insisted I had overreacted, painting my decision to cut ties as immature and impulsive. The underlying tone of their words always circled back to the idea that I was wrong for cutting them off, that I was the one breaking up the family. As a result, I have never bothered replying to any of them. Now my college so far has been going great. I've been able to focus entirely on my studies, my interests, and most importantly, on building friendships with people who see and value me for who I am. I have taken up a part-time job working at a local diner so I can save money for my future. It's nice to meet new people at the diner and talk about their lives. Since cutting off my family, I've poured myself into my classes, my social life, and everything my new environment has to offer, filling my days with meaningful experiences. I genuinely haven't spent even a single moment missing them or wondering how they're doing. So, yesterday, out of the blue, when I received an email from my parents, I was surprised. They had stopped writing to me a long time ago, since I had not even once replied to any of their previous emails. In this email, my parents urged me to contact them immediately as they had some grave news to share with me. Despite everything, despite the years of hurt and rejection, I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something terrible had happened. My heart started racing, and all I could think about was the possibility that someone in the family might have fallen seriously ill, or worse, passed away. Despite my resolve to keep them at a distance, the concern got to me. I picked up the phone, unblocked them, and called them back immediately, my heart racing as I braced myself for whatever news they were about to deliver. My parents told me that the news they wanted to share with me was about my older sister, Amelia, who is going through a severe personal crisis. Apparently, they've discovered that she's been battling drug addiction, something that has taken a devastating toll on her life. According to them, her addiction has spiraled to the point where she's lost her job, drained her savings, and now finds herself with no resources or options left. This news was a complete shock to me, as I had no inkling that anything like this was happening to my sister. Amelia, in my mind, had always been the high-achieving, dependable sibling, the one who had their lives together. But now the same sister had a drug addiction? It was hard for me to even believe that. In my parents' eyes, Amelia's addiction was something so unbelievable that it shattered the image they'd held of her. I could sense their disbelief, their desperation, and more than anything their overwhelming concern about how this might reflect on their reputation if anyone else ever found out. As they shared all this, they also expressed the hope that I might have some answers for them. They mentioned how surprising it was that Amelia, of all people, had fallen into something as destructive as drug addiction, given how responsible and grounded she had always seemed to them. And then, my father asked me, in a voice laced with suspicion, "You didn't introduce her to drugs back then, did you?" I was completely taken aback by the insinuation. The idea that they could think I had anything to do with Amelia's struggles, let alone something as serious as introducing her to drugs, was not only absurd but deeply insulting. I mean, I didn't even do drugs myself, so how could I introduce drugs to my older sister? Also, I hadn't had any contact with Amelia or the rest of my family in years, precisely because of how they had treated me. I had been out of their lives, focusing on building my own path, far away from their toxicity. Yet now, in the face of their perfect image of Amelia cracking, they were quick to look for someone else to blame, and apparently, I was the easiest target to point fingers towards as always. I told them how ridiculous they were to even suspect me and asked them to talk to Amelia before assuming anything. Throughout our conversation, I noticed how my parents seemed more fixated on the shame they feared it might bring to the family if Amelia's news came out. My mother, rather than showing concern about my sister, seemed fixated on the embarrassment she felt over my sister's secret habit. She kept talking about how shocking it was to discover this side of her perfect daughter, and how people would talk if they ever found out. My mom then began pleading with me to come back home so I could help them take care of Amelia, since she and Dad felt overwhelmed and unprepared to handle the situation with my sister. I mean, what do we even do? I feel so ashamed of her. So, maybe you can talk to her for us? My mom asked me as if this was a valid request to make to me after years of being in no contact. I told them plainly and without sugarcoating my words, I could not help Amelia. She needs professional help. My sister is battling something as serious and complex as addiction, which can't simply be solved with family intervention at home. I stressed that if they truly cared about her well-being and wanted to support her to get over her addiction, the best and most compassionate thing they could do would be to send her to a treatment center where experienced professionals could guide her recovery. But my father immediately shot down the idea of sending her to rehab, practically shuddering at the notion of their family's good name being tarnished by her admission into a treatment center. He argued that sending her to a place like that would only serve to destroy their reputation in front of others. He couldn't bear the thought of people knowing that their one accomplished daughter had a problem as serious as drug addiction. My dad scolded me for even mentioning this option, as if acknowledging her addiction out loud was somehow more shameful. He insisted that I needed to come home, that the three of us needed to work together to take care of Amelia, keeping her under watch every minute and every hour so she wouldn't relapse, as though constant supervision would magically solve the issue. He went on and on about how they just wanted my sister to feel better and go back to her usual life as soon as possible. In their minds, it seemed that as long as no one else knew, everything would go back to normal. They wanted me to be complicit in a charade, to act as though everything was normal while hiding her struggles from everyone else. As I listened, I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. Why were my parents so obsessed with their reputation? So obsessed with what others thought of them? My sister was clearly struggling with something serious, and here was a chance for my parents to truly step up, to show that they could put their daughter's needs above appearances, to actually make a difference in her life, and they still couldn't do it. Clearly, these people had not changed a bit. And on top of everything, now they were trying to pull me back in, expecting me to uphold this family facade by helping them take care of my sister, who they always compared me to. I informed them that I needed some time to think things over. After all, I have my classes and job to think about, so I can't just up and leave. My parents argued that I could take at least 2 or 3 weeks off to help them out since they really needed me. Right now, I can't help but feel conflicted about the whole thing. A part of me wants to make sure that Amelia is okay, to find out if there is anything I can do for her. But another part of me just wants to be selfish and let my parents handle their golden child all on their own. Even now, they are more concerned with saving face than truly addressing the heart of the issue, so I don't know if I can be much of a help. Ida, if I refuse to go back home and take care of my drug-addicted sister? Update 1. Okay, wow, I didn't expect this story to blow up. I have received hundreds of comments and it's taking me some time to go through them. I would like to clarify a few things. I don't hate my sister. In fact, I genuinely care about her and truly want to help her. However, over the past 3 years, I've experienced a level of peace and stability that I hadn't felt before, all because I've had no contact with my family. Reconnecting with my sister means opening the door for my parents to re-enter my life as well, and that's something I'm dreading. For everyone asking how my sister ended up struggling with drug addiction and wondering if this is something she may have been dealing with for years, maybe even before my parents recently found out, I honestly don't know for sure. According to me, Amelia was clearly the golden child, praised and upheld as the perfect daughter. This kind of pedestal often comes with immense pressure to maintain that image, leaving little room for vulnerability or failure. If Amelia felt that her worth was tied solely to her accomplishments and how others perceived her, any setback, no matter how small, might have been devastating. I guess over the years, drugs could have become her coping mechanism to escape the weight of those expectations or the fear of letting our parents down. The thought that my sister might have been silently struggling all this time without telling me makes me feel even sadder. I wish she had felt she could be open with me earlier. I would have wanted to be there for her, to help her find a way through it before things got to this point. It just leaves me feeling helpless, like there's this huge part of her life I didn't know about and maybe could have supported her with if I'd known. Also, my parents are high-achieving individuals themselves, so that is the reason why they expected the best from me and my sister from a very young age. I need some time to think about everything and will update if something more happens. Update 2. After a lot of internal debate and encouragement from some of the comments I read, I decided to reach out to Amelia. Despite everything, she is my sister, and I felt it was important to hear from her directly rather than basing my decisions on my parents' version of events. I sent her a text first, just a simple message asking if she wanted to talk. It took her a few hours to reply, but when she did, she agreed to a phone call. When we finally spoke, the voice on the other end of the line sounded like a shadow of the sister I remembered. Amelia was quieter, hesitant, and there was a heaviness in her tone. She opened up, bit by bit, about what she'd been going through. Amelia admitted to struggling with addiction for the past few years. It started shortly after she graduated and began working at her law firm. Because she had always been the perfect, high-achieving daughter, she struggled to maintain that status at work as well by always working harder than others to please her boss, in the hopes that she might get more recognition or promotion. However, eventually, she started to feel exhausted and burnt out. But even then, Amelia felt she could never falter, never slow down, and certainly never ask for help because she had to live up to the expectations everyone had placed on her. When the stress became unbearable, a friend introduced her to recreational drug use as a way to unwind. What began as occasional use spiraled into dependency before she even realized what was happening. Amelia also revealed that, for the longest time, she felt trapped. She couldn't admit to our parents that she was struggling because she knew how they would react. Their constant emphasis on appearances and their unwillingness to acknowledge anything that didn't fit their narrative left her feeling isolated. Even when she began losing control, she kept up the facade, pretending everything was fine. It wasn't until she spiraled into using drugs, lost her job, and depleted her savings that she couldn't hide the truth anymore. She told me how embarrassed she was to even admit this to me and asked me if I was judging her as hard as she was judging me. Hearing her story was heartbreaking. For the first time, I saw that the pedestal our parents had placed her on wasn't a privilege, it was a prison. While I had been dealing with the pain of being overlooked, she had been dealing with the suffocating weight of being their golden child. Both of us, in our own ways, had been harmed by our parents' favoritism and their obsession with control. I told her that I wished she had talked to me about her feelings because there was no way that I would have ever judged her. I understood her more than she could comprehend, and my only regret is that I wasn't there for her through all this. Amelia then apologized to me genuinely for everything that had happened between us. She said sorry for the way she had always sided with our parents. She admitted that, at the time, she hadn't understood my pain because she was so consumed by her own struggles. She told me how much she regretted not standing up for me during the graduation party speech and felt awful for the part she played in making me feel like I didn't matter. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger I'd carried for so long, to remind her of how much her words had hurt. But the bigger part of me, the part that had always cared and looked up to my sister, just felt sad for everything we both endured. I told her I appreciated her apology and that I didn't blame her. After all, she had been as much a victim of our parents' toxic behavior as I had, just in a different way. Amelia told me she's scared about the future and uncertain about whether she can recover. She feels like she's let everyone down, but more than anything, she's afraid of letting herself down. She said she wanted to go to rehab but felt stuck because our parents were so opposed to the idea. They had convinced her that admitting herself to a treatment center would bring shame to the family, and she didn't want to disappoint them even further. I told her as firmly as I could that she needed to prioritize herself and her recovery above anything else. I explained the same thing that I had told our parents, that addiction isn't something she can overcome alone, and professional help is not only necessary but also the best chance she has at getting her life back on track. She seemed hesitant, but I could tell my words resonated with her. I offered to help her research treatment options and even suggested that if she wanted, I could help her find a program far away from our hometown where she wouldn't have to worry about gossip or judgment from anyone. I reassured her that there was no shame in seeking help and that she deserved to take this step for herself, not for anyone else. By the end of our conversation, Amelia sounded lighter, almost as if the act of sharing her truth with me had lifted some of the burden she'd been carrying. She thanked me for reaching out and promised to think seriously about what we'd discussed. I told her I'd be here for her. Update 3. Hello everyone. After speaking with Amelia, I feel so much better. I wish we could have reconnected years ago. Anyways, Amelia has agreed to finally get herself admitted to a treatment center, far away from our home. My parents are furious at her for this decision, and they are also pissed that I am suddenly supporting her. They cannot fathom that Amelia and I are now talking to each other behind their backs. My parents have threatened that if Amelia doesn't recover from her drug addiction even after going to the center, then they are going to blame me for foolishly pushing her to this decision. For now, I've decided to help Amelia from a distance. I'll continue to support her emotionally and check in on her regularly, while she recovers. If our relationship continues to improve, then I will definitely visit her in the future. As for my parents, I'm going to go back to no contact with them after this. I won't let them drag me back into their web of control. I hope this will be the wake-up call they need to finally reflect on their actions, but honestly, I'm not holding my breath.